The morning sun poured itself over Azure Bay Resort in soft bands of gold, as if someone had lowered a warm filter over the world. The shuttle rolled to a stop at the edge of the circular drive, brakes sighing as it settled. For a second, everyone stayed seated, suspended in that small pause before vacation officially began. Then the doors folded open, and Maya Allen stepped down onto the pale stone. The heat kissed her skin, tinged with salt from the unseen ocean. In front of her, the resort rose like something lifted straight from a movie still. Tiers of white balconies, walls of glass catching the light, palm trees standing like sentries around a courtyard of fountains. Water arced in perfect symmetry, sparkling as it fell back into turquoise basins. She stood there and let herself look. This was the kind of place people posted about wistfully, adding captions with words like paradise and finally and blessed. A world of infinity pools and soft robes, boutique cocktails and handwritten welcome notes. Not the world of double shifts and late bus rides and counting coins at the end of the week. Behind her, someone's suitcase rattled over the pavement. A couple laughed quietly as they passed, wheeling sleek, matching luggage. A bellhop guided a family toward the entrance, their kids already arguing over who got the top bunk. Maya tightened her grip on the handle of her old carry-on. It had passed through more bus stations than airports, the fabric faded and the metal corners dented. It looked small and tired against all this shine. She thought of the kitchen table back home, of the plain white envelope Hannah had slid across the surface 2 weeks ago, her eyes bright and wet. "You don't get to say no," Hannah had declared. "I've already paid the deposit. Mom's on my side. We're cashing in your vacation days. Maya, 5 days, no work, no night shifts, no running between jobs. You go, you breathe, you come back. That's the deal." Time. 0.5s. Their mother had nodded from her seat, hand curled around her mug of tea. The thin hospital bracelet had still been fading on her wrist. "We just want to see your face when you're not exhausted, sweetheart," she'd said softly. Now here she was, standing under the wide, open sky of a world that didn't know anything about overdue bills or payment plans. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of air and light. High ceilings soared above polished floors that gleamed like still water. Tall windows framed a slice of ocean in the distance, calm and impossibly blue. The air was cool and faintly perfumed with something floral and expensive. At the front desk, the receptionist greeted her with practiced warmth and perfect posture. The check-in process took only moments. A flash of ID, the exchange of a credit card, a few taps on a keyboard. "Welcome to Azure Bay, Miss Allen," the woman said, sliding a keycard across the marble. "You're in a Deluxe Garden View room. Breakfast is included, and you have full access to the pools, fitness center, and private beach. If you need anything at all, just dial the concierge." Maya nodded, murmured thanks, and followed a bellhop toward the elevator bank. The soft chime of the elevator doors, the faint whisper of wheels on carpet, the muted thump of her own heartbeat in her ears. It all felt strangely unreal. Her room was the kind of space she'd only ever seen in glossy photos. A king-sized bed, dressed in white linen, sat beneath a padded headboard. The walls were a soft, calming gray, accented with ocean-themed art. A sliding glass door opened onto a balcony overlooking lush gardens, where sunlight slipped through palm leaves and painted shifting patterns on the ground. She walked slowly, touching things as if they might disappear. The heavy drape, the smooth glass, the cool metal of the balcony rail. The bathroom had a rainfall shower and a row of tiny, perfectly arranged bottles, the kind of details someone had been paid to think about. She set her carry-on on the stand and unzipped it. Her clothes looked humble among the high thread count and polished surfaces: folded jeans, a pair of well-worn shorts, 2 dresses that had seen better days, the one swimsuit she owned, practical underwear, plain sandals, a single pair of earrings. Maya placed a small frame photo from her bag on the bedside table. Her Hannah. and their mom squeezed into a narrow frame, laughing at something the camera hadn't captured. "You sent me to a movie set," she murmured to the photo. "I hope you know that." She changed into her swimsuit, pulled a simple blue cover-up over it, and tied her hair into a loose bun. Her reflection in the mirror looked fine. Not glamorous, but not tragic either. Just a woman who'd worked too many shifts and hadn't had a real vacation since she couldn't remember when. She took the paperback she'd been saving for the trip from her bag, slid on her sunglasses, and stepped back out into the hall. The map had shown the main pool at the center of the resort, stretching toward the sea. If this was going to be her one shot at escaping the grind, she might as well start with the cliché. The path curved around manicured lawns and dense green foliage. The deeper she walked into the resort, the more the sounds changed, the hum of air conditioning units and rolling luggage fading into the murmur of voices, the bright splash of water, the faint call of seabirds. The main pool spread out like a mirror, catching the sky in its surface. Loungers lined the deck, each topped with a folded towel. White umbrellas provided shade for people sprawled in designer swimwear, drinks glowing in jewel tones on small tables. Somewhere, a speaker played music soft enough not to intrude, but insistent enough to keep the mood buoyant. Maya chose a spot near the far edge, where the noise thinned and the ocean was a clean line of blue beyond the glass barrier. She spread her towel, sat down carefully, and dropped her bag at her feet. For a moment, she just let herself sit, feeling the warmth of the stone through the thin fabric, the brush of salt-laden air against her skin. She opened her book and found her place. Words had always been her cheapest form of travel, a ticket out of small apartments and sterile hospital rooms. Now, reading about some fictional city while surrounded by all this luxury felt a little like cheating. But she didn't care. She wanted the familiarity of it. She had read less than a page when a voice cut clean through the low hum of conversation. Maya. Her name in that tone dropped her straight back into a life she'd spent 12 months trying to outgrow. She didn't move at first. Maybe she'd misheard. Maybe there were other Mayas at Azure Bay. The universe was large. Coincidences happened. Maya Allen. She looked up. He stood a few chairs away, framed by sunlight. Time had been kind to him. Not that he'd ever had much trouble in that department. Kyle Langford wore a pale linen shirt, unbuttoned just enough to suggest he'd never worried about dress codes, and tailored shorts that hinted at both leisure and money. His hair was styled into deliberate effortlessness. He held a pair of sunglasses in one hand, the other tucked casually into his pocket. Kyle had always been good at taking up space without asking permission. "Kyle?" she said, her voice sounding distant even to herself. "Wow. Hi." She hadn't seen him in a year, not since the night he'd sat across from her at the small kitchen table in her apartment and explained, in the careful tone of someone delivering a performance review, that he needed more polish, more ambition, more compatibility. "I'm at a point in my life where image matters," he'd said. "I can't always be with someone who doesn't understand that." Now, here he was, dropped into the one place where she'd believed the past couldn't reach her. "I can't believe you're here," he said, stepping closer. "Azure Bay. This is unexpected." "I could say the same," she replied, fighting for lightness. He laughed. "Company retreat. Top sales performers get rewarded. They booked out half the resort for us." He gestured vaguely toward a cluster of people wearing similar branded shirts. "Perks of hitting targets, you know." He said it like it was normal, like everyone measured the worth of their time in incentives and bonuses. "And you?" he asked, eyes flicking over her cover-up, her book, her simple sandals. "Vacation." Her throat tightened. The truth sat on her tongue. "My sister saved for this. My mother cried when she saw the reservation email. I came because they needed to see me rest. My fiancé insisted," she heard herself say instead. "He likes places like this." The sentence left her mouth before she could catch it. Kyle went very still. "Your fiancé," he said slowly. Maya felt something stubborn flare inside her. She'd once watched him admire other women at parties, women in sleek dresses and expensive shoes, then come home and tell her that she didn't have to try so hard. It's not like anyone at your work cares what you wear. Something about the memory made the lie easier to double down on. "Yes," she said, sliding her book closed. "We're here together." Before he could respond, another presence joined them. She approached like she knew how to walk into a room and tilted toward herself. Dark hair fell over one shoulder in soft waves. Her white swimsuit and sheer cover-up turned the sunlight into a spotlight. Her features were sharp and symmetrical, made for high-resolution cameras and curated feeds. "There you are," the woman said to Kyle, then followed his gaze to Maya. A perfectly calibrated smile appeared. "Hi, I'm Trinity." Kyle's hand brushed her waist in a gesture that was both possessive and proud. "Trinity Hale," he said. "My fiancé." The word stung, even though Maya had seen it coming from the moment she saw him. Trinity lifted her left hand, the diamond on her ring finger catching the light. "Santorini," she said lightly. "Cliffside restaurant, string lights, string quartet. Very predictable, very perfect. He gave me his grandmother's ring. No pressure, right?" "It was the right time," Kyle added, glancing at Trinity with the gaze of a man who had chosen correctly according to his spreadsheet. "We're aligned." Maya almost laughed. She remembered nights when alignment meant splitting fries, because he didn't want to pay for a second entree. Months when alignment meant reminding him that his rent was due while he chased a promotion, and she picked up extra shifts to cover the gaps. "Congratulations," she said. Her voice was steady. She was absurdly proud of that. "Thank you," Trinity replied. Her eyes held a certain gleam as she studied Maya. "And you said you're here with your fiancé as well." "Yes," Maya said. Her mind blanked. She could feel it. Kyle's curiosity sharpening. Trinity's interest turning a fraction more pointed. They were waiting for her story to fall apart so they could both rise a little higher in comparison. "Where is he?" Kyle asked, casually, the way someone might ask about a misplaced towel. The sensible thing would be to stop now, to shrug and admit she had exaggerated, to accept the small humiliation and walk away intact. But she thought about that evening at her kitchen table, when he'd said, "You're a good person, Maya. You just belong to a different world. I need someone who can stand next to me in the life I'm building." He'd said it gently, as if he were doing her a kindness. Her eyes scanned the pool deck, grabbing at the first lifeline that looked solid enough to hold the weight of her pride. He sat under the shade of a tall palm, a little removed from the busiest part of the pool. His chair was angled so he could look toward the ocean if he wanted, though his attention was fixed on the laptop in front of him. He wore a dark polo and well-fitted trousers that said he hadn't fully left work behind. His hair was pushed back, but a lock had fallen forward, as if he'd run his hand through it one too many times. A watch hugged his wrist, understated and expensive. "That's him," Maya heard herself say. "Over there." Kyle and Trinity turned in unison. The man at the table felt the weight of their gaze. He glanced up, his eyes landing on Maya's face. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, her, clutching a lie she wasn't ready to drop, and him, caught in the crosshairs of it without warning. She stood. "If you'll excuse me," she said, her heart beating loudly in her chest. "I should say hello." Each step across the stone felt loud, though no one was looking at her. The air shimmered with heat. The scent of sunscreen and chlorinated water and something citrusy from the bar mingled together. As she approached, the man closed his laptop halfway, giving her his full attention. Up close, his eyes were a cool gray, alert and intelligent. There was a calmness about him, the kind that came from being practiced at navigating complicated conversations. "Hi," she said in a rush, stopping just short of his table. "I'm about to ask you for something completely unreasonable, but I swear I'm not a crazy person." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's a promising opening." She swallowed. "Back there, my ex just appeared out of nowhere with his perfect fiancé, and I panicked and told them I was here with my fiancé and then pointed at you, and now they're watching us. And if you could just pretend to know me for maybe 2 minutes, I will owe you for the rest of my life." There. It was out. He studied her for a second, taking in the tightness around her mouth, the way her shoulders were drawn up, the desperation she hadn't managed to smooth out of her voice. Most people, he knew, would laugh, or excuse themselves, or at least ask for more context. But most people hadn't spent their lives in rooms full of powerful people, watching the subtle ways they made others feel smaller just by standing there. He followed her glance back toward the loungers. He saw the man in linen, holding himself like someone who believed the world owed him admiration. He saw the woman with him, poised and polished, appraising the scene as if it were a negotiation. He looked back at Maya. "Well," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting slowly. "I was just thinking my afternoon could use something unexpected." He stood, the chair scraping softly over the stone. He was taller than she'd anticipated. When he extended his hand, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. "Adrian Cross," he said. "Apparently your fiancé." The relief was so sharp she almost swayed. She took his hand. His grip was steady and warm, a small anchor in the dizzy swirl of the moment. "Maya Allen," she managed. "The most grateful person on this entire property, I swear." "Let's test that," he said lightly. "Which one is he?" She angled her head toward the pair by the chairs. Beige linen shirt, fiancé in white cover-up, both very pleased with themselves. Adrian turned his head as if casually surveying the pool. His eyes passed over Kyle and Trinity, sharp and assessing, then came back to Maya. Time 0.5s. He didn't like the way the man looked at her. There was familiarity there, yes, but also something else. An expectation of superiority, like he was already rehearsing the story he'd tell later about this encounter. "All right," Adrian said softly. "Here's how this works. I'm going to put my arm around you. If at any point you want me to back off, you tap my hand twice. We can call this an emergency performance." She nodded. "Deal." His hand settled at the small of her back, fingers light but unmistakably there. The contact startled her with its simplicity, with how right it felt for something so obviously wrong. They walked back toward the loungers, their shadows stretching ahead of them on the pale stone. "Maya, you didn't introduce us," Kyle said, standing as they approached. "I was getting to it," she replied. "Kyle, Trinity, this is Adrian Cross, my fiancé." Adrian extended his hand to Kyle. Up close, he could see the faint tightness in the other man's jaw, the quick flick of his gaze over Adrian's clothes, his watch, his stance, slotting him into some internal hierarchy. "Nice to meet you," Adrian said. His tone was polite, nothing more. "Maya's told me some of your history." Had she? Of course not. But it didn't matter. The implication was enough. Trinity offered her hand next. "So this is the famous fiancé," she said, the word famous wrapped in silk and curiosity. "I hope in a good way." Adrian returned. "I'm trying to live up to the job description." Maya almost smiled. "Almost. How long have you two been engaged?" Kyle asked, the question casual on the surface, sharp underneath. 9 months, Adrian answered, immediately. "We met about a year ago." There was no hesitation, no glance at Maya for confirmation. The confidence in his voice made it sound like a practiced truth. "A year?" Trinity asked. "That's fast." "When you meet someone who changes the way you see your entire life," Adrian said, looking at Maya as if the rest of the world had blurred away. You adjust your timeline. Heat crept up the back of her neck. She knew it was an act. That didn't stop her pulse from stuttering. It was a strange thing, watching someone rewrite your history in front of you with such tenderness. In that moment, something shifted, not just in the way Kyle looked at her, but in the way she looked at herself. For the first time in a long time, she saw an alternate version of her life, one where she was not the afterthought, not a stepping stone on someone else's path, but the destination. And that, she realized, was the real power of the lie she'd told. It wasn't just for Kyle's benefit. It was, dangerously, for her own.